Are you down with PWA? Yeah, you know me. I mean, if we're going to talk about PWAs and Magento, who better to do it than Eric Erway? Eric is the Senior Manager of Product Management, Magento Commerce at Adobe for merchant and shopping experiences. Now, I'm not sure how he's going to fit that title on a business card, but Eric joined Magento in 2015 and brings 20 plus years of experience building high performing teams and launching award winning products at Dell, AOL, and Price Waterhouse Coopers. Again, jump in the chat if you would and help me welcome Eric to Meet Magento New York. Magento New York.
Great, thank you so much, TJ. Great. What an intro. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started here. So today we're going to talk about the current trends, Headless, PWA Studio, and what's to come in Magento 2.4.1. My name is Eric Erway, the Senior Manager of Product Management for what we call our merchant and shopping experiences. Behind me are a series of amazing teams back at Magento in our community that help pull a lot of this together. So special shout outs to all of those who really pulled together what's really going to be some great experiences that I think you'll be excited to see here in this session. So one of the big themes for today, and really kind of taking Ben's keynote to heart, is really around change. Magento 2 is changing, right? We've talked about this a lot, but change brings opportunity, and change really is about perspective. So when you think about Magento 2 changing, it's really about 5 major areas that's happening. From the very beginning, we continue to work on and improve the developer experience. So what you'll hear about are areas that we're improving around that. We're also adapting for the mobile-first economy. Again, the world is changing. We're becoming more and more mobile-first, and I think the current pandemic has really created those opportunities. In addition to that, we have to be more agile. We have to optimize for both speed and the need for change, not just with the browsers, but really as businesses. Beyond that, expectations have raised. We've got to extend for dynamic shopping experiences. And at the very end, we have to empower merchants and business users. So for those who have seen these talks before, I'm going to do my very best to bring this in focus for the merchant audience. Very often we talk about this with partners, and we're going to tell some of that story, but we really want to bring this back to the merchants. We ultimately know that change is a big part of any business. And so what we want to do is really bring that up to speed, let everybody know what's happening, and answer any questions that you have. This is really the beginning of that change. So as part of Adobe, we get a lot of great analytics, and these analytics and these findings are really no different. So smartphones or mobile experiences continue to be more than half of all the visits that we're seeing to date. One of the biggest opportunities, though, is only accounting for about 40% of all sales. That creates a big opportunity, and it has a lot to do with the experiences that are created to date. Smartphones are expected to contribute more than 50% of online spend by September 2022, and that's a pretty conservative estimate. Forrester and others consider this almost 75% in some models. And if you bring this to the holiday season, which I think is timely and relevant, 42% of shopping is going to be done from smartphones this overall holiday season. And in addition, 28 billion more is going to be spent on smartphones this year. Beyond those facts, which are a little bit more mobile or smartphone specific, Black Friday is going to reach $10 billion. Again, these are all part of the Adobe holiday predictions that just came out a couple days ago. So I added this, I think, for some relevancy. 33% of the growth is happening, and in-store pickup is going to be a key consideration for that last-minute shopping. Think about the experiences that you're putting together as a developer, partner, and merchant to help you address these. And of course, again, 42% of shopping is expected to be on mobile. Those are some pretty big figures, and I think as a business, you really need to think about what that experience looks like and how you get there. So those are the current market trends, but let's bring this down a little bit of level and talk specifically around headless commerce and really how it works with Magento. So for those who are less familiar with headless commerce, it's really a technique that's been going on for a long time, especially in the Magento community. Sometimes we call it API-based commerce. Sometimes we call it using REST, using GraphQL, what have you. And the reality is it's the beginning of an evolution at Magento. Headless commerce in its basic form, and this is a really great definition from Gartner, it helps decouple business logic, transactional, and data aspects of commerce from presentation. So what does that really mean from a Magento 2 standpoint? What does this really mean in terms of our evolution of headless into Magento? So I do apologize, again, I originally said this is going to be more of a merchant conversation, and it really is, but it's important to understand the facts and where we are with regard to our journey. And it started off with a lot of the great work that happened in our traditional approach. If you think about what happened and what was built around Magento 2.0, based on the findings from 1.0, of course, we started off in a path that had the front end, the back end, the APIs all together. You could still access, and there's some great experiences that were created in that traditional approach. But we want to start agility and other needs that businesses need to move faster with these opportunities. So roughly 2 to 3 years ago, with the help of James Utland and others, we started our path in terms of decoupling the front end from the back end. So again, what does that mean? We often talk about things like Venya, like Luma, like PWA Studio, like GraphQL. But again, as merchants, it's really important to understand what that means. Again, this decoupling, the separation creates those opportunities. And it creates opportunities not only at the shopping experience, but also creates opportunities for IT teams and others to start really thinking about making changes at point of need instead of making them all at once. That's really what it means. And it really means bringing in a new set of standards like our React-based PWA Studio and our React-based Venya storefront. But it also opens the doors to a brand new ecosystem with the Magento. We're really excited about some of the third-party opportunities that have been created as a result of this. All of this resides upon the emerging work that's been happening around GraphQL, which we introduced with Magento 2.3. And we continue to be on a path towards headless that's going to be separately decoupled from the front end with storefront APIs that are coming soon, and Magento 2.3 Plus, which is the backend that serves all of this. Again, from a merchant perspective, in many ways, this can be the nuts and bolts of what's happening, but it's important to understand that progression because as a merchant, this allows you flexibility. This allows you less static experiences, and this allows you performance and really hitting the mark in a world that really demands more from mobile, demands more from experience, and in many ways is affecting conversion. So we talk a lot about PWA Studio. I certainly do about that. And so how does this all fit? PWA and PWA Studio is a form of headless. Headless and Headless Magento can be found in a variety of examples that exist across the community. There's quite a few of these. Some of our larger examples and sites like Harbor Freight, Satva Mattress, and a few others are putting this together in a really, really great way. But really, ultimately, it started off 2 to 3 years ago with a set of development tools to build, optimize, and deploy a series of functional components, UI components, and build upon all the great work that's happening at the GraphQL layer. Again, it's important to understand what this is because often we get questions like, is PWA Studio complete? Is Venya complete? And the reality is headless has been happening for quite some time. But if you think what we're trying to do as a product, it comes down to building a great experience and a set of developer tools that makes this easier than ever before. Starbucks is a great example. They did commerce years before all of this when PWA itself was a standard back in 2015. We want to bring those tools to market, a set of standards, and really a new set of capabilities for Magento that allow you to do that without having to go through heavy customization. So that's really what this is about. So if you're really thinking about this, though, and looking at this from a merchant perspective, the other question we often get is, so what about Luma? And the reality is, with all of this coming together, Venya is the future of Luma. This is not something, not something that should be much of a surprise for everyone, but ultimately we're building a new path, a new front end for Magento that will one day replace the current front end that is based on Luma. But we're doing it very differently, and we're doing it very thoughtfully, and we're basing everything on great UX and great research that allows us to get there. That's why we're taking our time to do so, not only because we want to ride upon the great GraphQL work that's been done to date, but we also want to do this in a way that can be easily customized, leveraged, and baked in with principles from the very beginning. So we continue to make a lot of progress, which we'll talk about here towards the end with regard to the roadmap and other activities. So if you think about Venya itself, though, it's really a reference storefront, but it's also a series of components. You saw that in the diagram before. In the longer form of this discussion, we'll really start talking about the demo of Venya, which is widely available at venya.magento.com. And what you'll see here is a very robust browse experience. And with the recent addition of PWA Studio 7, a pretty robust cart and checkout experience. But we've got some work to do. We'll cover that here in just a little bit. But the reality is, nothing should stop you from considering this right now. Much of this was already done in headless forms, well before PWA Studio and during times of development as well. So how do we get here? So again, we mentioned Magento 2.3 is the beginning of how we started our headless journey, really around GraphQL, and we're really proud about that. So if you think about the diagram we saw before around headless, PWA Studio helps that build, optimize, and deploy. But in the reality is we've used PWA Studio to shape GraphQL and fast follow all the work we've seen to date. So you'll see this trend in how we build this in the roadmap and some of the exciting updates to come. And from a merchant standpoint, and really from an industry standpoint, we've got a lot of great recognition. And I think the headline for this one is the analysts really get it, and they get what we're trying to do. If you look what Gartner's had to say in the most recent critical capabilities for digital commerce, they see and recognize that adoption of PWA Studio and our reference storefront in Venya continues to grow as it becomes the default front-end technology for new clients. It is really a reflection of all the great work done by the team and really the Magento community. We couldn't be prouder about that. Forrester also gets it as well. Our goal, similar to the Starbucks example we talked about before, is to position a lower cost and complexity of adopting progressive web app experiences. If we do this right, which we will, in a few years, we're not going to be talking about PWA. We're just going to be talking about the new front end of Magento. We're just going to be talking about shopping experiences. That's where we want to go. And the analysts have informed, but they also recognize and understand where we're going with this. So what about the merchants? Let's bring this all together. And this is a slide that we've shared in different forums at previous Meet Magento events. The reality is, again, going back to change and perspective, PWA Studio adoption and Headless is really different for everybody. And the way that we frame this is developers, partners, and merchants. So if you're a developer back in 2018, you may be kind of interested in this. Developers like playing around with new frameworks. Magento has a long history of PHP, and we've had a lot of experiments in the community, and have often included that in the core code itself. Partners take a look at this and go, okay, maybe there's some trends here. Maybe we can fill in the gaps. And merchants ultimately are the ones driving the change. The merchants themselves have to understand, what is the opportunity? What does it mean for me? How does it solve my business? Does it affect conversion, revenue? What is the cost? It was early days, right? 2015 was the advent of PWA as we know it. There are a lot of great solutions that are out there. The team came together and started to address those. But you'll see this progression from left to right, going from the developers, partners, then merchants. So we start to think about the adoption itself. It really depends on your segment. And the reality is, we're really, really encouraged by the early adoption that's happened from both partners and merchants. Again, partners who have filled in the gaps with our current solutions, but then the merchants themselves who understand the power of what we've been putting together with PWA Studio, with Headless, and really solving for these superior shopping experiences. So we're finally at a point with 2020 where the developers love what we're doing. We actually have seen some even more interesting experimentation on the front end, which we encourage. Again, we're a large community. We're growing. There's change. There's also some partners doing some great work with regard to the accelerators, filling in the gaps in some areas that are ahead of roadmap, which is great, and really helping us light the way and really look at completion for our key areas like Venya and other areas as we get into B2B next year. And merchants are happy. You're starting to see some early results, both from a revenue conversion, but also an efficiency standpoint. And then next year, this is just going to be the default for everyone. Everyone's excited about it. Developers are really excited, and then merchants are starting to see the successes of the launches that have happened. But if we really think about merchants themselves, it's about shopping experiences. Again, we've kind of gone through the nuts and bolts of what this is, why it's important, how it's kind of come together, and what our approach has been in the last 2 to 3 years. But ultimately, if you think about PWA, if you think about Headless, and if you think about the agility, especially in these times, to address these needs, if you look at this example from Gartner, these capabilities unlock these type of experiences across the entire customer journey of digital commerce. So take, for example, the discover layer. SEO, SEM, and landing pages are changing as we know it. It's more than just a capability like server-side rendering. It's really about the change that's happening, and in our collaboration with Google and others are starting to recognize things like mobile performance and experience and other aspects like Core Web Vitals as key to that discovery phase. Even opportunities like the Google Play Store, marketplaces, and wrapping your PWA in a way that can be published there helps you really get the acquisition and the distribution you need. Engagement often, though, is where we spend the most time. The idea, again, taking Venya, for example, around search, browse, compare, that's the heart of the experiences that we're creating, as well as select with some of the recent work, again, around cart and checkout with PWA Studio 8. But ultimately, if you look downstream, it's really a big opportunity for us to think about fulfillment, think about in-store pickup, and some of those capabilities that PWA brings. Again, longer form of this, PWA really helps you bridge the gap in those near native experiences like notifications, like offline, like these other areas where if you think about placing an order and having to come back to your store, there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities with limited connectivity, especially outside of the US. And again, in-store pickup, which is very timely and relevant now based on the data we've seen, being able to be notified when your order is ready for pickup. These are once experiences that were reserved for native that are now coming together for the very first time, certainly in core, but again, we're encouraged by some of the experiences that we're seeing with partners and merchants. So let's talk a little bit about the PWA Studio, really the program by the numbers, and we'll go through these relatively fast. There are 50 known Magento stores built using PWA Studio today. There's 20 known third-party extensions and themes for PWA Studio. And to date, we've seen over 700 stars in GitHub. And the reality is this all comes together by way of the community. We talked to over 2,000 members in our PWA community channel, and we've had over 100 contributors to date. But none of this would be possible without our community maintainers. Again, this is a product that is built and shaped with the community. So we're super, super, and really honored to have people like Jordan and Lars as part of this journey. Here are a handful of those early launches. A lot of these now are available and built with. These are just a select few of these. Again, there's a lot of great data and case studies that you'll see either from the partners or as shared by Magento and Adobe themselves that support revenue, adoption, and performance. Extensions are coming along as well. So Marketplace will eventually be the home for a lot of these, but we've seen a lot of content, functionality, and payments that help support this. And headless experiences themselves can often start as components. So here's a really good example of something that launched earlier this year. Most people didn't realize this, but as you start to look at add to cart and others in tivo.com, they're using Venya components. So ultimately, we're looking at a world that doesn't necessarily rely upon a single storefront, a single experience. It's really experiences at point of need. And so this example was built by Bounteous earlier this year. It's launched. You can take a look at it today. And they did this in 4 months. And so the reality is that flexibility and agility is also a really strong business benefit. Couple experiences that are coming in the future. Product recommendations is in progress, and so we're working with that with some of the work that's already in the current state. And we're also looking at opportunities with AR, VR, and 3D. This is a community project that we're looking to start up at some point. Again, unlocking these experiences relative to the key capabilities that you would expect from Adobe, and partnering with other functions across the board like Substance and others, bringing this to market. We've got enough of the core to start taking a look at this, which we're really excited about. So this all comes together, though, in 2.4.1. 2.4.1 is really about a lot of the fit and finish, additional GraphQL coverage and key capabilities, especially around my account. PWA Studio 8 with over 100 updates, quality, performance, and security, site-wide analysis tools, which we often call as SWOT, and then enhancements to Page Builder, Gallery, and the B2B experience. Again, for a relatively minor release, there's quite a lot of feature and functionality in it. And there's a lot of support with Headless as part of that, in addition to what we released back in July with 2.4. So we'll go through this relatively quickly, and we'll make this deck available. A lot of our work, again, is very much in the open. But here are the current roadmaps for PWA Studio, GraphQL, and how to get started. So PWA Studio in particular, there's a lot of work that's in progress. The areas you see here, the lightning bolts, are currently in development, which we share and show with the community every single week. We've currently got work around in multi-locale currency switching by way of community. So thank you to AbsoluteNet for their contribution. And we're working our way left to right in finishing up areas like My Account and other areas that will make more of these experiences turnkey in the future. Again, follow us in a variety of different formats, and we're happy to share this at any time. GraphQL is in a similar state, finishing up B2C, then switching gears into B2B, and then additional coverage as we see fit. A lot of the GraphQL work, as you can imagine, is the predecessor to what we're doing at PWA, and we're near complete with B2C, as you can see. A lot of this actually landed with 2.4.1. So if you want the details, recommend taking a look at the release notes there. And getting started with Headless Commerce, PWA, and Magento 2.4.1 has never been easier. So here's a variety of links to get started with these. Again, our biggest recommendation for merchants is really literally to get started. Have your teams reserve some time, start playing around with this for the very first time. You can actually point Magento instances using PWA Studio and start experimenting, learning React, learning some fundamentals. There's some great training and trainers that are out there to help you get started, including some of the Adobe resources. And we always encourage contribution. Ultimately, contribution and how this comes together is a big part of not only what we're doing, but how we're doing it. And again, super, super thankful and really could not be prouder of the work that's been done by the community that has brought this to life for the past 3 years. We're really at a point now where we've gone from the developer experience all the way to the partner experience, again, filling the gaps, to a merchant experience where they start to understand the potential well beyond some of the details that we covered here. And again, if you have any questions, we're pretty easy to find. You can find us on social media. You can queue up a meeting at any point. And of course, you can reach us on our Slack channels in a variety of different ways.
All right, we do have a few questions, or at least a couple of questions in the chat. Get those coming. I know we've got just a little bit of a delay here, so we want to give everyone a chance to get those questions in. So the first one, Eric, can you share some case studies running with AEM and Headless with Magento?
Absolutely. I think the TiVo example is probably the best one. There's a handful of other ones, but TiVo is that one, and there have been a couple talks about that Nishant and the Bounteous team have done. Again, with the launch of it fairly recently, it's more technical and launch specific results, and so they did that in 4 months with some of the components we've talked about, but which are which do have a degree of interoperability, which is great. But we'll see more and more of those over time. But there's a handful of others that can put together and share at a later date. But TiVo.com is probably that best example with a few other ones, and those are already launched. And we've got several others that are in development.
And the next question, can you brief more details around Venya? So share more details around Venya.
Absolutely. Yeah, 20 minutes is hard to cover everything, so I tried to hit the high points. So Venya itself has really changed over time. Venya is used, the idea of it is used in different contexts. And so, again, we get the question is, when is Venya going to be done? And the reality is people are getting started with what we have. But Venya itself is a reference storefront. We know that with Luma and the blank theme and where developers and partners got started before, it was often very heavily customized. So think about it as a kit to get started with the new front end of Magento. But the reality is Venya itself is really a theme as well. So the concept of theming against that reference storefront is also in play too. But we're careful not to use that because what the reality is, this is a brand new and entirely different stack than how we've done Magento 2 in the past. And so inherently, this isn't just a theme to add to Magento. And there are a couple of solutions out there that are closer to that. But this is a brand new way of it. And we did a lot of research up front. And we actually tried some experiments to try to make this a theme. And the reality is it was too binding. It didn't allow us to achieve the goals that we wanted as a team. So hopefully that helps. We've got a lot of documentation. And I think that demo at venya.magento.com gives you a sense of what's currently in production. And we have a very active development version of that as well, with key features like internationalization and localization that just landed about a week or so ago.
The next question, wow, cool to know TiVo and Harbor Freight are using Magento as a backend. You mentioned using Venya components. Does that mean you can build a front end with Venya, but then if a third party, let's say, that adds functionality to the checkout, you can still utilize the Luma checkout?
Yeah, that's a great question. So probably one of the discussions we don't have enough that are often in person at events like these is that you can, in many ways, use what you need from PWA Studio itself. And so you can use just GraphQL. So the Harbor Freight example is one that just uses GraphQL. Satva Mattress, just GraphQL. They're doing some great work with Magento on the back end, and they've done everything themselves on the custom for that, which is great. You can use just the components, though. That TiVo experience uses components specifically on that product details page, then also with cart. But if you pay special attention, they're actually using the traditional Magento 2 checkout because they wanted to use a variety of extensions at that time. That was roughly 6 or so months ago. So there are different ways to do it. They're good. You really got to, as a merchant, kind of weigh out the pros and cons of each of those as you potentially introduce some complexity. But the reality is, you can use what you need, and it's really a different way of thinking, I think, than traditionally everything at once. And I think you can look at project plans and projects to kind of look at places to get started as well, which is great.
It looks like that is all the questions that we currently have in the chat. Eric, are there any parting shots, anything you want to leave folks with before we take a little bit of a lunch break?
I would say, if anything, thank you, TJ. Thank you to the Mage Mojo team for putting together Meet Magento New York. It is always an honor and a thrill to be here. We are really, really sincere in wanting to make this the next generation shopping experience for Magento, but as you can see, also Adobe. But it can't be done without the help of our community. And so I would say the parting comment is really just get involved. Take a look at what we've got, ask the questions, have your team start taking a look at this, and really start to experiment and prototype with it. We've got a really exciting future ahead, and we'd love to be part of it. And if you have questions and feedback, let us know. We take that to heart, and we use that to shape our product. And so that's really it. And so again, thank you again for everything, and appreciate your help as the moderator and host.
Yeah, we're going to take a lunch break here for about an hour. I've got some leftover lasagna in the fridge calling my name. I mean, if I were you, I'd take lunch at your desk while popping into the Avalara booth. I mean, if you go chat with one of their tax automation experts, you can enter for a chance to win a $100 Visa gift card. I mean, you don't want to miss out on free money. Everybody loves free money. I'll see y'all back here in about an hour.